Scandalous Eric and I were sitting in the living room of an apartment that neither of us were allowed to be in, waiting for a stripper to pick us up and buy us baseball caps. I guess stripper might be an overly provocative description. While Louise did make her living in a club undressing for strangers, she was first and foremost an artist and art school student, secondly, a woman who Eric was sleeping with, and third, a friend. She was also someone who made a lot more money than me, which was nice because in 2002, fitted Boston Red Sox hats were going for around $25 a piece. Louise was late. Eric and I were bored. We sat on a futon staring at the wall, the same futon we sometimes folded down at night and slept on, because at this time, Eric and I were both homeless, or at least without homes of our own. I ran my hands through my short hair. That morning I had woken on the same futon with hair down to my shoulders. Eric was beside me, already awake, so I turned to him and asked, "Can you cut hair?" "What kind of cut?" Eric replied. "Like a fade, I guess." "I don't know if Anderson has clippers," Eric said. We lay in our friend John Anderson's apartment. He lived here with 3 other roommates, some who didn't mind us crashing here, and some who did. Anderson's room was just beside the living room, through a pair of sliding doors. Eric got up, pushed one door open, and asked, "Anderson, do you have a hair buzzer?" The room was dark. Anderson was clearly asleep. Eric walked to Anderson's dresser, opened a few drawers, and started loudly rummaging around. After a bit, Eric walked to a wall, flipped on the light, then returned to the dresser. The room was a mess, clothing everywhere, half-eaten bowls of food. There was an enormous pool of dried ketchup in the center of the floor, and a plastic ketchup bottle laying beside it. We'd been teasing Anderson about this spill for over a month, but he still hadn't bothered to clean it up. "What are you doing?" Anderson asked, rolling over in bed. "Looking for a hair buzzer." Eric and Anderson were close, childhood friends. "Get the fuck out of here," Anderson said, turning away. "You know I don't have one." 20 minutes later, Scandalous Eric and I were both shirtless in the bathroom as Eric hacked at my hair with a pair of scissors. "Turn your head to the right," Eric commanded. "This looks great." And it was true. Eric was doing a terrific job. Eric and I had been friends for a little over a year, and in that time we'd become pretty close. We'd walk around Boston for hours having long discussions about what it meant to be a human. We both knew a ton of people in the city, and we'd keep tally of who ran into more friends as we wandered. Both of us put up impressive numbers. It was a fierce competition. Eric was half Puerto Rican and handsome with a smooth, boyish face. He had started working out around the time that we met and now had a larger build than me, although we were both the same height, on the shorter side of average. Eric refused to get any kind of real job, but he survived well in the city, coming up with odd ways to make money, legal or otherwise. I found that he could do most things he set his mind to, including cutting hair. Suddenly, we were interrupted by someone knocking on the already open bathroom door. Anderson's roommate, Adam Ohio, stood in the doorway. Adam was taller than Eric and I, with shaggy hair and a pudgy belly, although the rest of his body was fairly skinny. "How long are you guys going to be?" asked Adam. "I need to shower." "We're right in the middle," I said. "Well, I gotta go to work," replied Adam. "So go to work," said Eric. "You don't need to shower every day." Adam let out a sigh and said, "I got to today because I didn't shower yesterday." "You didn't shower yesterday?" exclaimed Eric. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" "You just said I don't," Adam began, and then he stopped himself. He shook his head and said, Can I just use the bathroom? We're right in the middle, Eric repeated my words. Adam looked at Eric and, with a little too much aggression, yelled, Can you go one day without starting shit with me? I'm starting shit? Asked Eric, matching Adam's volume. It's Fletcher getting the haircut. Why am I always getting blamed for everything that Fletcher does? And this was also somewhat true. In fact, just 2 weeks earlier, Eric had been kicked out of this apartment, banned from ever returning because of something that I started. Well, actually, it started with Adam and his throwing knives. Adam, Ohio collected knives and obscure emo records, and maybe some baseball memorabilia. I don't quite remember. It all seemed lame to me. It's safe to say that Eric felt the same way. No one wants to fuck you for your knife collection, Eric told Adam one afternoon. Girls do not like that. It's weird. Eric stared Adam in the eyes and finished with a definitive statement. Don't collect things. But on the day that Adam brought home the set of 3 throwing knives, we all gathered in his room. Adam placed a large board against one wall, and we all took turns throwing knives at the board. Sometimes we missed and put a hole in the floor or the wall, but the apartment was already pretty fucked, so no one was worried. It was a fun afternoon, and everyone was in a good mood. Later, Adam went to work, and having nothing else to do, I found myself back in Adam's room. The knives lived inside a 4-foot-wide glass case that sat atop Adam's dresser. Eric was right. It was weird. Resting in the case beside the throwing knives sat blades of all sizes, including a couple of butterfly knives and an illegal switchblade. I flipped a latch, opened the top of the case, and removed the throwing knives. I began tossing them against the board, but, of course, I almost immediately became curious about what it would be like to throw the other knives, so I opened the case again. That's when Eric found me. "What are you doing?" he asked from Adam's doorway. I pulled the switchblade out of the case and asked, "Do you think this will stick in the board?" "Yes," said Eric. "Definitely." So I pushed the button, deploying the blade, and threw the knife. The handle made contact with the board, and the knife tumbled to the floor. "You're throwing it wrong," said Eric. He retrieved the switchblade and stood just beside me. He threw the knife, and the handle again smashed against the wood. In the end, strangely, it wasn't even the switchblade that we broke. It was one of the butterfly knives. But that took a while. Now, why did Eric get blamed for this in a way that I didn't? To start, Eric was louder than me. He was opinionated to an extent that some found difficult. Also, he'd been doing little things around the apartment that were pissing off the roommates. For instance, he had started drawing large penises on all the passive-aggressive notes about who should clean dishes, who should pay gas bills, who should be allowed to stay over, and what time the people staying over should go to sleep. He also crashed at the apartment more often than I did. I was only an occasional guest. At this point in my life, I was regularly crashing at about a dozen different places around Boston. I ended up on Anderson's couch every couple of weeks, and only when Eric was sleeping there as well, because I knew Eric better than I knew Anderson or the others. When they called a house meeting about the knives, Eric also happened to be in the apartment. They made Eric sit on Anderson's bed while everyone else convened in the living room, just on the other side of the sliding doors. After the meeting, Anderson joined Eric in the bedroom and said, "So I guess you probably heard all that, right?" "Yeah," said Eric. "It was really weird." "Totally weird," said Anderson. Anderson took a big breath and let it out. "So, you can't stay here anymore." "Yeah, totally," said Eric. "Totally." "But what do you want, Anderson? Do you want me to go?" "I want you to be here," said Anderson. I love you, man. Yeah, totally, said Eric, nodding his head. So I'm not gonna leave. Anderson thought about this, then said, I don't think you should leave either. But you need to go for at least a day or two, so everyone will chill out. No problem, said Eric. Consider me gone. He stood up, smoothed out his shirt, and said, I'll be back Wednesday. Anyway, all of this brings us back to the afternoon when scandalous Eric and I sat on Anderson's couch, waiting for Louise to pick us up in her car and buy us baseball caps. I turned to Eric and asked, You know your friend Audrey from the Cape? Yeah, said Eric, lighting up. Audrey's the best. I've known her forever. She's cooler than every other girl. Everyone else sucks. Yeah, she's cool, I said, and then I mumbled, I don't really know her that well. You trying to hook up with her? Asked Eric. I heard she's into me, I said. Hell yeah, bub, said Eric, patting me on the shoulder. You gotta make that happen. Don't just sit around being an idiot. Call her up. Invite her over. Eric gestured around the living room as if we lived there, as if inviting Audrey to Anderson's apartment made any sense. I nodded. I've got Audrey's number, said Eric. You want to call her? I shook my head. I'll probably see her on Saturday, I said. In the small city of Boston, there was a weekly party where a fair selection of our friend group gathered on Saturday nights. Just call her, said Eric. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and held it in front of me. I should have listened to him. I mean, that's why I brought up Audrey in the first place. You see, Eric was more comfortable and confident talking to women than anyone I had ever known. For this, I both admired him and felt crushingly jealous. I wanted his confidence, but I couldn't will it into existence. This was a transitional period for me. I wasn't a kid, I was 22, but I had come of age amongst a group of people who were overwhelmingly uncomfortable with sex. As a teenager in the 90s, I discovered punk, and this allowed me to escape the rednecks of my hometown in Vermont. Once I had a driver's license, I found a city 30 minutes from my parents' house with a small but vibrant punk community. These outcasts were either too strange to be accepted into mainstream culture, or more often, too shy and sensitive to survive it. But, like me, they were relieved to find a like-minded community. So we made art together, and we loitered in a parking lot together, and we rebelled against parts of the culture that we didn't want to be a part of. We didn't eat meat. We protested the local power plant. We denounced sweatshop labor through patches sewn onto our used clothing. We rebelled against war, and we rebelled against sex, because sex was mainstream. Hookup culture was mainstream. We thought it was a capitalist idea. Sex was what the villain wanted in the teen movie, and so we rejected that. No one in our group was having sex. No one was making out. If someone got drunk at a party and kissed someone else, they were looked down upon. Honestly, even admitting that you had sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend was questionable. We were nerds making art, not love. And, at that time, this was fine with me. This was comfortable. Okay, but you're being a fucking pussy, said Eric. He continued to hold his phone in front of me. Fine, he said after a while. He opened the phone and used it to call Louise, but she didn't pick up. Then he put the phone back in his pocket. We sat on the futon silently for a time. On the coffee table in front of us was a pair of scissors and a skateboard magazine. I idly ripped a page from the magazine and then used the scissors to slice it into 4 pieces. I then began rolling these pieces into little cigarette-sized tubes and placing them on the table. When that was done, I ripped out another page and began again. Somehow I had made it to age 22 without having sex. Or, it might be more accurate to say, I had made it while successfully avoiding sex. But, either way, now the women were coming for me. It all started with dancing. By the early 2000s, people from the Boston punk community began putting on club nights. These were dance parties that focused on some of the new, more sexualized music that was coming out of the alternative scene. And where there was dancing, there was kissing. And you all know what comes after that. Suddenly, women were taking me home. They'd say, "You're coming with me." And so I did. Sometimes we made out, sometimes I just held them in their beds. It was something that, up to this point, I hadn't even let myself know I wanted. I hadn't let the idea creep into my head. As I rolled more and more pieces of paper, I started leaning them against each other, creating a teepee shape. Eric watched my work, and then he asked, "Are you building a little fire?" "Yeah, I'm stacking a little fire pit," I said. "This," said Eric, "is a great idea." He picked up a slice of paper and began rolling it. Of course, on top of club nights, there were house parties. I can picture a period of my life where gathering at someone's house was always centered around a band playing. But then, sometime later, dancing to a DJ became involved with this as well. We'd clear furniture out of the living room and bob around to La Tigre. As the night went on, someone might play the Smiths album, Louder Than Bombs, and we'd hold each other on the dance floor and sing it in its entirety. It was on a night like this that a girl took me aside and started kissing me. I knew her. Her name was Dee Dee. We were at her house. Dee Dee took my hand, and I followed her to her room. Soon we were in our underwear, her on top of me in her bed. We kissed for 10 or 15 minutes, and then she started slowly shimmying her way down my body. Dee Dee removed my underwear, and I told myself that this was okay. She took my erect penis in her mouth, and I tried to reason with the idea that women enjoyed sex, that it was not evil, that it was natural. But I got too in my own head and lost my erection. I was embarrassed. I mumbled something about how I had finished, although it was obvious to both of us that this wasn't true. But Dee Dee didn't make a big deal of it. She joined me back at the top of the bed, and we kissed for another hour. The party was still going on. We could hear music and laughter, but we didn't leave her room. I wrapped my arms around Dee Dee, and we fell asleep. I woke the next morning in her bed. Where else was I going to go? I didn't have a home. It was 2 days later at a coffee shop that a friend took me aside and told me that another girl, Audrey, wanted to sleep with me. Scandalous Eric and I had a decent-sized stack of rolled papers on the coffee table, as well as a reserve sitting beside us on the couch. I went into the kitchen and came back with a lighter. I set fire to one rolled-up piece of paper at the bottom of the pile. We watched the flame quickly pass through this piece and work its way into the middle. Soon the whole thing was ablaze. The coffee table was some kind of dark wood. The ceiling was a standard 10 feet tall. The flame rose to about 2 feet as we added additional pieces of paper. We silently watched our work dissolve in front of us, a smile on our faces. We'd gotten through most of our stash when Eric's phone began to ring. "Okay," said Eric. "We'll be right out." We stopped adding paper and watched the flame die down. The magazine pages had a short burn life, and soon they were only ashes smoldering on the surface of the table. We used our hands to pat this out, and then I ran into the kitchen and came back with a trash can. We brushed the singed papers into the can, which I returned to the kitchen, and then we walked outside and found Louise waiting in her car. Nice haircut, Louise said to me. Look at you guys in your fucking Jinko jeans. They're Levi's, Eric said, getting in the passenger seat of her car. How many t-shirts are you wearing? She asked Eric. 3? It's 3 t-shirt day, Eric said. Fletcher, Louise said, turning and looking at me in the back seat. You're not wearing 3 t-shirts. Oh my God, you are, aren't you? You guys are incredible. Eric stared Louise in the eyes and said, 3 t-shirts is the correct amount of t-shirts for a man to wear in this weather. Perfect, said Louise, putting the car in drive. Let's go get you boys some baseball caps. I guess I should take a moment to talk about Eric and my fashion choices in 2002. Now, it is well known that 90s alternative culture was powered by elitism. There were things that were considered counterculture and things that were not. And if you were part of the underground, there was no greater crime than enjoying art that crossed into the mainstream. Books, music, movies, and fashion. You were either with us or against us. To partake in popular culture was sinful. To worship obscurity was saintly. Meanwhile, today, society grows closer to a monoculture. The underground loves Britney Spears, and the mainstream owns a Joy Division shirt. There's been much said about these 2 different cultural eras, but I've seen little discussion about the transitional period in the middle. So let's look at that. While attending my small-town high school in the late 90s, I lived in a world that I didn't choose, a world that I didn't see myself reflected in, so I rebelled against it. As I mentioned, there was no eating meat, no having sex. I purposefully showered infrequently. I dressed in skin-tight clothing during a time when everyone else was draped in relaxed-fit jeans. Everything I wore was torn and sewn back together, and I hoped that these choices made normal people uncomfortable. This rebellious nature just came naturally to me. Simultaneously at this time, I was roaming around the East Coast, meeting small groups of other outcasts, and desperately trying to get them to accept me. I went out of my way to wear the right things and listen to the right bands, so the punks knew I was one of them. Of course, this flies in the face of that original rebellious attitude. But by 2002, everything about me had changed. It was my 4th year living in Boston, and my entire life was now rooted in the underground, a scene which was huge in New England at that time. I spent my days with punks and hippies, metalheads and theater kids, bike messengers, skinheads, and the indie elite. I rarely interacted with a normal person. The problem was, as I lived comfortably in my alternative bubble, my natural desire to rebel had not faded. So, when you're surrounded by the underground and you want to defy something, your attention naturally turns to the underground itself. You have to break down the walls of what it means to be alternative. You don't like sports? I asked someone at a basement punk show. Are you crazy? Not football, not hockey? Have you ever heard of Slapshot? Greatest hardcore band ever. You think Slapshot hated sports? You're going to see the Royal Tenenbaums? Eric asked Adam Ohio with a disappointed tone. Adam was putting on his jacket, preparing to leave the apartment. Have you seen Men in Black 2 yet? Eric went on. It has Will Smith, America's sweetheart. There will never be a time when everyone doesn't love Will Smith. Interpol? Jesus Christ, are you serious? Eric and I had cornered Anderson in his bedroom. Have you even listened to Sean Paul Duddy Rock? Give me the light and pass the dro, my friend. Get a fucking beat behind your music. These opinions made our friends both uncomfortable and angry at the same time, and this brought Eric and I no shortage of joy. Now, it is important to point out that we were not saying these things just to say it. We actually enjoyed these things. We did. They're easily enjoyable. That is why they are so well suited to the mainstream. But at the turn of the century, no one in the underground seemed to understand that you could actually enjoy things that were easily enjoyable. That had not been an option before, at least in my lifetime. Also, on some level, I think I was making up for my teenage years, the period when I desperately wanted acceptance from the punks. As I got older, this previous desire for validation embarrassed me, and I attempted to erase it by daring people in the alternative scene to dislike me. I wanted to show everyone how little I needed their approval. It should also be noted that it wasn't just us two little assholes challenging these ideas. The phenomena was slowly building energy and sweeping across the scene. It was a fun game, a game which we did not foresee having any lasting impact, although, as I mentioned before, alternative culture looks very different these days, for better or worse. Anyway, all of this came to a head for me when I returned to school in the fall of 2002. I had spent the summer touring the country with a poorly constructed garage rock band. I had a mop top, flared brown slacks, and a tan corduroy jacket stolen from the Levi's store. Over the years, I had been a punk, and then an indie kid, and now I was a garage rocker, all different incarnations of the same alternative scene. But I woke one morning and decided I wanted nothing to do with anything that my friends were into. I lay on Anderson's futon next to Eric. I could tell Eric was already awake. Without looking at him, I said to the ceiling, "I'm going to be a hip-hop kid now." And Eric, without missing a beat, said, "I'm going to be a thug." So now, here Eric and I were, sitting in Louise's car, wearing baggy jeans and 3 t-shirts each, on our way to the Prudential Center Mall to buy some baseball caps. Eric opened Louise's glove compartment and began rummaging around. "Okay," said Louise sarcastically. "I guess you can look in there." Eric flipped over some pieces of mail, opened and closed an empty glasses case, and eventually removed a single red pencil. He closed the glove box and used the pencil to begin drumming vigorously on the dashboard. "So what's going on?" asked Louise. "What's the gossip?" "Audrey from the Cape wants to hook up with Fletcher," Eric said. "Oh, that's cool," said Louise. "I like Audrey. She's pretty hot. You gonna take her out to dinner or something?" "I don't know," I said. "I don't know if she's actually into me." "You just told me she was into you," said Eric, still drumming away on the dash. I thought about this, then said, "I don't know. I swear, there are girls that... Since I've been couch surfing, there's an entire group of women who think I'm, like, badder than I am, like crazier or something. And they like that. They think that that is hot. But I don't know how to keep that up, you know? Because when they actually get to know me, they realize that I'm actually a total fucking pussy. And the problem is, these girls only like assholes." "Girls don't only like assholes," said Louise. "There's girls out there who like every type of guy." "Yeah, what are you talking about?" said Eric. "Women will literally fuck anyone." He was now steadily hitting the pencil against the car's rearview mirror. I leaned forward between the seats and began telling a story. The other night, I saw a dude at a party and he was being super rude to this girl, and she kept talking to him. He was saying she was fat and stupid and stuff like that, crazy stuff. And finally the girl said, "You're being such an asshole." And then the guy said, "I'm being an asshole because I want to fuck you." And then later, I saw that same girl leave the party with that guy. I can't be mean like that. I can't even, pretend to be mean like that. "You don't have to be mean like that," said Louise, readjusting her mirror now that Eric was drumming on the dashboard again. Just don't be a pushover and you'll be fine. I am a pushover, I said. No, you're not, said Louise. Look at you guys running around in your stupid baggy outfits, pissing off all of our friends. That's not being a pushover. Eric was now using the eraser of the pencil to turn on Louise's car stereo. He flipped through the dial until he arrived at Jammin' 94.5, Boston's hip-hop station. Missy Elliott came blasting through the speakers. Louise moved her hand toward the stereo, and Eric smacked it with the pencil. Don't change it, he said. I'm just turning it down, replied Louise. I'm trying to have a conversation with Fletcher. She reached for the stereo again, and Eric again smacked her with the pencil. What the fuck? She said. You just stabbed me with a tip. No, I didn't, said Eric. Let me see. Louise held her hand up to Eric's face, and he said, Oh yeah, right there. And he touched a place on her hand with the eraser. Louise pulled her hand away. Can you put down the pencil? She asked. Can you put down the pencil and stop being the center of attention for like 1 minute? Eric kept his eyes on Louise as he began drumming on the dashboard again. What's wrong with needing a little attention, Louise? Can't a guy just do something to get a little attention? He kept drumming away. Louise drove silently for about 30 seconds. Eventually, she made a motion towards me with the back of her head and continued our conversation. Fletcher, she said, yelling over the music. All I'm saying is that you don't have to be an asshole. All you have to do is have your own opinions. And you don't need to make up some fake opinion just to impress her. Just, if you're having a conversation with a woman and you don't agree with something she says, just tell her what you think. Tell her your honest opinion. Women don't like guys that just agree with them. They like guys who have their own opinions about things. That's all you need to do. I don't know, I said. I still think, this might be stupid, but I still just think that if women only fuck nice guys, then every guy in the world would be nice. Like, getting laid could be the number one incentive for a guy to be nice. But women still only have sex with assholes. Eric dropped the pencil and turned around to face me. That's not true, he said, because I'm a nice guy and women have sex with me. You're not a nice guy, said Louise. I'm like the nicest guy I know, exclaimed Eric. I'm honest. Everyone else is just full of shit. They're utterly full of shit, and you know what? Eric smacked his palm on the dashboard of the car and yelled, It fucking kills me. An hour after sunset, Louise dropped us off in front of Anderson's apartment. Scandalous Eric and I had our new Red Sox hats, and Louise had to make her way back to Providence, Rhode Island, where she went to school. After we said our goodbyes, I stood on the sidewalk holding my hat in my hand. I turned to Eric and asked, Are you taking the sticker off? Dude, no, said Eric. You can't take the sticker off. What's wrong with you? Anderson lived on Mission Hill. His apartment, like everything else on the street, was a 3-story wooden building built around the year 1900. We walked up a set of stairs to a porch that rested on the first floor. Eric rang Anderson's doorbell, but no one answered. We stood there for a moment, and then Eric rang the bell about 6 more times in quick succession. Anderson is off work, said Eric. Why is no one home? He rang the doorbell a couple more times. Anderson lived on the first floor. His living room had a big bay window that hung over the right corner of the porch. Eric removed his new hat and pressed his face against this window. The lights were off. The room was dark. I left my backpack in there, I said. I need it for school tomorrow. No worries, said Eric. This window's usually not locked. Eric pressed his palms against the glass, gave it a lift, and sure enough, the 100-year-old window opened right up. Eric pushed the top half of his body through the window into the dark living room. He then lifted his left leg over the windowsill, but just as his foot came down on the other side, he suddenly began screaming. "Hey!" he screamed. "Hey!" His body was thrashing around. "What the fuck are you doing?" Eric yelled. Strangely, my first thought was that Eric was being attacked by some burglar who had just been caught in the act of robbing the apartment and was now fighting to get out. But then I heard Adam Ohio's voice come out of the darkness. "You're not allowed in here," Adam shouted. "It's not your apartment," Eric yelled back. I squatted down, peered through the window, and saw Adam's hands on Eric's shoulders, pushing him toward me. Instinctively, I grabbed Eric by the waist and began pushing him into the living room. Now we were at a stalemate, Adam pushing out, and Eric and I pushing in. No one was saying anything. We all just grunted. This went on for a couple of seconds, and then scandalous Eric punched Adam in his side. Soon, both Adam and Eric tumbled down on the floor of the living room. "What are you doing?" shouted Eric, scrambling to his feet. "You tried to set fire to the apartment," yelled Adam, still lying on the floor. "All of my stuff is here, Eric. People live on the other floors. You could have killed someone." Eric stood silently for a moment, head cocked to one side, thinking about what Adam had just said. After a second, Eric came back to life. He lifted his arm, made a sweeping gesture across the living room, and shouted, "That was fucking Fletcher, you fucking moron! I didn't even do that!" Eric began pacing around the living room. "Jesus Christ," he said. "Take that up with Fletcher. He's right there." Eric pointed at me, still crouching on the front porch. Not knowing what else to do, I waved to Adam from the other side of the window. I didn't see Eric again until Saturday. Like I mentioned, there was a party that me and my friends frequented on Saturday nights. It was named Start. Here, punks, hardcore kids, goths, and other assorted weirdos gathered to dance. This club culture was, again, a whole new idea for the outcasts of my generation, and we were all trying to figure it out together. The location of Start roamed during its few years of existence, but at this time it was taking place at a large club on Lansdowne Street, across from Fenway Park, the armpit of Boston. Many clubs lined this long block. As a result, you had to pass through a sea of the worst people to get to our party. Girls in polo shirts and flared jeans, college bros in cargo shorts, New England townies, also in cargo shorts. These were the people that many of us had spent our lives avoiding. Meanwhile, we paraded through this crowd in the hottest alternative fashions of the day. Girls in pencil skirts and tights, vintage blouses on top, bobbed hair with bangs, horn-rimmed glasses, too much makeup. Very 60s Godard. Everything had to be tight, again as a rebellion against the loose-fitted trend that dominated the mainstream. The boys all wanted tight pants, but, of course, no one made tight pants for men during these years, so the men wore women's jeans. This was paired with tight denim jackets on top, children's-sized t-shirts, peak coats with a wool scarf around the neck, shaggy hair pinned down over the ears and swooped across the forehead, if the boys had enough hair to do it. As we walked down the street, it was almost expected that the bros and townies would call us faggots, which of course some of us were. Maybe you could avoid this if you kept pace with the large skinheads who also attended our party. Even the townies didn't want to pick a fight with them. Of course, as Eric and I entered Start, we were dressed more like some of the college bros than the people in our own alternative scene. It was almost as if we had walked into the wrong club altogether. We found Anderson near the dance floor. "You guys look insane," he said. "What's under your hat?" Eric had a bandana tied around his head with an all-black Red Sox hat placed on top of the bandana and pulled down over his eyes. He wore a North Face windbreaker with low-slung, loose-fitting black jeans. In his back pocket was a cue ball wrapped in a second bandana, to be used as a weapon if necessary. I looked across the room and saw Audrey standing behind a tall table talking to a few mutual friends. I turned my head quickly before she had a chance to notice me. Suddenly, my eyes fell on Louise, who was approaching us from the dance floor. "Hi, lady," I said, giving her a hug. "Hi, lady," Eric repeated after me. Louise turned to Anderson and, with a smug look, said, "I bought them those hats." "Eric looks insane," Anderson said. Louise thought about this for a moment and then agreed. "He does look insane," she said, "but I love it." Anderson turned to Eric, still buried under his hat. Eric was bobbing around to the music. "Remember when we'd go to hardcore shows and you actually looked good?" said Anderson. Eric stopped dancing. He raised the brim of his hat, looked Anderson in the eyes, and said, "Yes, Anderson. When I was hardcore, I looked amazing. When I was emo, I looked amazing." "No one's bang swooped harder," I cut in. "No one's bang swooped harder," Eric agreed. "No one's eyeliner was blacker. No one's jacket was tighter. No one looked better than me then, and no one looks better than me now." With that, Eric pulled his hat back over his eyes and continued dancing while standing in place. After this interaction, Louise lightly patted me on the shoulder and asked, "Is Audrey here?" At this, Eric again raised his hat. "Yo," he said, "where is she?" I pointed at the table across the room. "Go talk to her." I shook my head. "What are you waiting for?" "I'm gonna wait," I said. "I don't want to bug her." "What are you talking about?" Eric asked. "Go bug her. That's all women want, a guy to talk to them." Eric was still dancing in place as he spoke. "You think you look cool over here hanging with your friends?" Eric went on. "Audrey doesn't care about that. Girls don't care if guys have any friends at all. They just want you to talk to them and not stop talking to them until you are fucking them. That's all it takes. Full stop." "That's true," Louise agreed. I thought about this and then repeated Eric's words. Talk to them until you are fucking them. But what about romance? And no girl wants to have sex on the first date. Then they feel used. People in this scene don't want to have sex like that. "What are you talking about?" Eric asked. "In this scene? Everyone is fucking everyone, dude. Everyone is fucking everyone. That's the problem with this town. You have sex with any girl, and 3 days later she's on a date with your friend." "No," I said. "My friends aren't having sex like that." "Dude, we have the same friends," Eric said. "You're talking like it's a whole generation of people when it's just you." "It is a whole generation," I insisted. "It's so many people I know." Eric just shook his head and continued dancing. 30 minutes went by. Eric and I walked around the room and said hi to people we knew. All the while, I followed Audrey out of the corner of my eye, keeping some distance. I thought I had a good grasp on her location until I heard Eric say, "Hi, lady." I turned around to find Audrey beside us. Eric pointed at me and said, "I heard you're into Fletcher. That's excellent. He is an excellent choice." "What?" asked Audrey. "Who told you that?" "I just heard it around," said Eric. "Oh," said Audrey, turning away. "Hi," said Eric again, almost shouting. He reached over and gave Audrey a hug. What's going on? You know Fletcher, right? Yeah, said Audrey. Hi, Fletcher. Hi, I said. Where's your hair? Audrey asked. She reached up and rubbed the back of my head below my hat. It's all gone, I said. I like the long hair, replied Audrey with an exaggerated frown. She stepped back and examined us. You two have a whole outfit going on, she said. We look good, right? I said, turning sideways, showing Audrey my profile. You look good, Audrey said politely. Look at these people, said Eric, motioning around the room. Why do people in Boston dress like shit? Look at Jonathan. Look at Benny. What the fuck is Anderson wearing? Look at him. They all look good to me, said Audrey. Okay, Jonathan looks good because mods never look bad. But literally, can any of these people think for themselves? Why are they all dressed the same? What do you mean? Asked Audrey. They all look exactly the same. Black pants, some band t-shirt, size extra small. All I'm saying is I don't care if some indie kid from Boston University thinks I look cool. I want Leonard Cohen to pass me on the street and think, that guy looks cool. That's what I'm going for. Audrey thought about this and then said, I don't know if Leonard Cohen would think you look cool. Eric pulled his hat back over his eyes and said, Leonard Cohen would think I look amazing. Well, after this, I basically did just what Eric recommended. I spent the rest of the night talking to Audrey, rarely leaving her side. Audrey was 2 inches shorter than me, with shoulder-length red hair and a lisp that I found attractive. She was comfortable conversing, but soft-spoken, and gave off the air of a cute librarian. We were both in college, but this never came up in our conversation. Instead, we looked around the club and commented on our friends, gossiping and trying to make each other laugh. Audrey wasn't interested in dancing, which was fine with me. We just hung on the side and talked until the night became late and people started going home. I'm sure Audrey was waiting for me to make some kind of move, but I never did. I didn't dare invite myself to her apartment, and of course, I didn't have an apartment of my own. The sad truth is, I wouldn't have been confident enough to ask her over, even if I did. Eventually, the lights came up and the bouncers started ushering people toward the door. It was at this point that Audrey made a play that is not uncommon for someone who is brave, but not quite brave enough. Instead of inviting me to her apartment, she did the next best thing. She invited everyone. I'm having an after party at my place, she said to me. Will you come over? Every Saturday, after the club closed at 2 a.m., we made our way to someone's apartment and continued the party. This was standard. Soon, Audrey and I were walking around the well-lit room spreading the word. Unfortunately, this was not going well. There's already a party at Jonathan's house, someone told us. Everyone's been talking about it all night. Where have you guys been? I saw Eric approaching, so I said, Party at Audrey's place. I don't know where Louise had gone, but Eric had some new girl with him, black hair hanging over her face. He put his hand down the front of this girl's low-rise jeans, grabbed her by the waistband, and pulled her to his side. Nah, he said, I'm leaving with this lady. The girl put her arms around Eric's shoulders. When Audrey and I got outside, we saw Anderson leaning against the wall. Party at my place, Audrey said. Okay, said Anderson. That sounds good. That's right near my apartment. This was the first yes we had gotten. Anderson gave us a thumbs up and said, I'm just waiting for someone to come out. Then I'm ready to go. So we stood next to Anderson and watched our friends exit the building. People flooded the sidewalk and kept talking loudly, laughing and screaming as if they were still in the club. Eventually, I asked, who are you waiting for?" But just as I said this, Anderson pushed his body off of the wall. "There she is," he said. "We're going to go to Audrey's place now. Is that cool?" With a dumb expression on my face, I looked back and forth between Anderson and the girl he was talking to. I glanced at Audrey and then turned back to Anderson again. Anderson stood near the door of the club. He raised his arm and placed it on the girl's shoulder. Then the girl looked at me and said hello, and I didn't respond because I was in shock. The woman Anderson was holding was none other than Dee Dee, the girl who had attempted to give me a blowjob less than 2 weeks earlier. "Okay," said Audrey, clapping her hands together. "I drove here. I can give us all a ride back to my place. But my car's parked way over near Little Steve's Pizza. Let's start walking." This intersection of relationships might seem a bit crazy, but at the same time, it was as normal as could be. After all, it should be noted that, just a year earlier, Anderson and Audrey also used to sleep together. Maybe Eric was right. Maybe everyone in this town was fucking everyone else. Audrey lived alone, which was rare amongst our friends in Boston. Her living room was tiny and mostly empty. She had a TV on a stand and a small couch that was more ornamental than comfortable. Nothing else. Not even a chair. We must have made some small talk, but I hardly remember. None of us had alcohol. Basically, as soon as we entered the apartment, Audrey ushered me into her bedroom and shut the door behind us. Anderson and Dee Dee were left with the tiny couch in the living room. Audrey illuminated a lamp atop her bedside table. She turned to me and, with a warm tone, said, "Homeless Fletcher is in my apartment." I stood near the door. I didn't know where to go. Audrey's bed was a mattress on the floor. I guess Audrey could tell I was lost because she crossed the room, put her arms around me, and suddenly we were kissing. Audrey removed her shirt, so I removed my own. She unbuttoned her pants, and soon we were both on our bed in our underwear. We made out for a long while, me on top with my elbows resting on her pillow and my hands holding her face. I lifted my arm and ran my fingers down the right side of Audrey's body, stopping at her hip. I then slowly moved my hand up her side, touching every bone of her rib cage and ending at her shoulder. Audrey pushed me and I flopped onto the bed. She leaned back, ran a hand through my short hair, and said, "I want to have sex with you." And this was what I feared. In spite of Audrey's words being as clear as day, I couldn't believe them. Sex was what selfish men wanted and women were forced to give. This was all my brain would tell me. Not to mention, there was the concern that my discomfort around sex would again cause me to lose my erection. In fact, because of the strange way that this night had unfolded, the reminder of this possibility was just on the other side of Audrey's door. I propped myself up on my elbow and stared at Audrey, beautiful on her low bed, waiting for my response. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Finally, I stammered for a moment as I said, "I don't do that. I don't have sex." "What do you mean?" Audrey asked, a frightened look on her face. With a little more confidence, I repeated my words. "I don't have sex." "Yes, you do," Audrey said. "You had sex with Dee Dee the other night." She pointed at the door. This took me aback because I didn't know Audrey or anyone else had heard about Dee Dee and I. I stared at the door for a moment, but then continued speaking with an even more authoritative tone. "No," I said. "We just hooked up. I've never had sex with anyone." "What do you mean?" Audrey asked again. "I don't have sex," I said, shaking my head in a matter-of-fact kind of way. "So you're a virgin?" "Yes," I said. This was the first time in my adult life that I had admitted this to anyone. After these words, I pushed my body to the head of the bed and leaned back against the wall. Audrey sat up in the center of her mattress. "This isn't fair," Audrey said. "I never want to have sex with anyone, ever. And now I finally want to do it, and you don't want to have sex with me?" "I don't want to have sex with anyone," I said, maintaining my position. And then I added, "I'm asexual." Now, this was obviously not true, but the word asexual had been thrown around in my circle of friends since I was in high school. It was a powerful statement testifying that you had escaped the evils of sexuality. Not to mention, at this time I worshipped the Smiths, and it was claimed that Morrissey himself was asexual. Of course, Audrey wasn't buying it. "You're not asexual," she said. "We were just making out." "I am asexual," I said definitively. But, as if to disprove this, Audrey shuffled her way back to the head of the bed and began kissing me again. Soon we were under her covers, this time with her on top. I ran my hand down to the small of Audrey's back, gracing the edge of her underwear. I then brought my fingers up to her shoulder blades, tracing the outline of each one. Eventually, Audrey rolled over and we switched positions. We kissed for another 10 minutes, and then I decided to attempt the one overtly sexual act that I was comfortable with. Audrey was still in her bra and panties. I ran my lips over the fabric of her bra as I slowly moved my way down her body. I kissed her stomach as I looped my fingers through each band of her underwear, slowly lowering them. I then went down on her. This was an act that I had done a few dozen times with a couple different women, and it was the one thing that seemed acceptable to me because my personal pleasure was removed from the equation. After some time, Audrey ushered me back to the head of the bed. I flopped down beside her, both of us on our sides facing each other. I put my fingers on her naked hip. Audrey countered this by running her hand down my stomach, sliding it into my underwear, and cupping my penis. I instantly grabbed her arm and moved her hand away from my body. "I don't do that," I told her. "What do you mean?" Audrey pleaded, looking confused and exhausted. "I just don't do that," I said. Without missing a beat, Audrey countered with the statement, "You know that it's okay that you're gay, right?" I shook my head slowly and said, "I'm not gay. I'm asexual." "You are clearly gay," said Audrey, "and I just want you to know that I'm okay with that." She rose up on her elbow. "And I can help you come out of the closet if you need me to." I lay there silently looking at her. "It's okay," Audrey said again. I moved my gaze from Audrey's face to the pillow that rested below her. I took a breath, then said, "I'm not gay. I just don't do that." This conversation went on for a little while, each of us declaring our untrue claims about my sexuality. But later, the talking evolved back into kissing, and then the kissing turned to cuddling, and eventually the cuddling. It resolved itself in sleeping. In the morning, when I left Audrey's room to use the bathroom, I found Anderson, a tall man, stretched across Audrey's couch with his legs dangling off the end. Dee Dee was crammed in by his side. 20 minutes later, Anderson and I, together, exited Audrey's apartment. We strode down the sidewalks of Mission Hill in the morning light. It was 4 blocks to Anderson's place, and as we walked, I couldn't help but ask him a question that kept circling in my mind. "Anderson," I said, "why didn't you just bring Dee Dee back to your place?" Anderson thought about this as we walked. Finally, he laughed and said, "I don't know." He took maybe 10 more steps and concluded with the words, "Whatever. It's all the same in the end." And I guess this logic made sense coming from a man who had left a puddle of dried ketchup rotting on the floor of his bedroom for as long as I could remember. After my night with Audrey, Scandalous Eric disappeared for nearly 2 months. As winter washed over Boston, Eric was nowhere to be found. Not at Start, the house parties, the Slab, or even Burrito Max. If I had known Eric a little longer, I would have realized that this was common. His friends had seen it before. But for me, I just kept cruising around Boston, crashing at different people's houses, and asking about Eric when I could. It was after Christmas break when someone finally gave me an answer. A girl with dyed pink hair who I didn't know very well. She rolled her eyes when I mentioned Eric's name at a party. "Eric's at Benny's apartment," she told me, coldly. And then she went on to say, "You know, last winter Eric stayed with me for a month? He ate all my food, used up all my nice shampoo. He used up everything in my bathroom. I couldn't get him to leave. I couldn't even get him to go to the 7-Eleven across the street. He literally sat in my apartment watching DVDs for 1 month straight." "Wow," I said, and then I asked, "Do you know Benny's address?" "And you know what Eric did when he finally left?" the pink girl went on. "Scandalous stole all of the insoles out of my shoes. Or the inserts. He stole all the inserts out of all of my sneakers. I tried to replace them with insoles, but they never fit right after that." I shook my head disapprovingly, and the pink girl did the same. We stood in the crowded party for a moment, silently denouncing Eric's actions. Then the pink girl sighed and said, "Yeah, I can give you Benny's address. He's down on 118 Hemingway, over near Berkeley. But you better watch out." The pink girl put her hand on my shoulder. "Benny's got a fucking cat over there that's addicted to cocaine." "What?" I asked. "How can cats do cocaine?" The pink girl just shook her head again and mumbled, "Benny, that fucking coke-dealing scumbag." I didn't know how trustworthy this source was, but I hoped the pink girl was right about Eric. I thanked her and continued cruising around the party, talking to some friends. The next day I walked down to Hemingway Street and rang the buzzer. As I stood there, I worried that Benny would answer the door. There were a number of Eric's friends that intimidated me, and Benny was one of them. Luckily, after a moment, Eric appeared in a sweatshirt and basketball shorts. "Yo," he said quietly, sleepily rubbing his eyes. "What's up? What you doing?" Eric stood there, looking bored. I guess after all this searching, I expected a warmer welcome, or at least some surprise at seeing me, but I got nothing. I watched Eric hold open the door as the cold January air blew past us into the building. Eventually, I removed my Red Sox hat. I pointed at my head and said, "It's time for another haircut." "Cool," said Eric. "Come on in." We walked through a foyer, up a flight of stairs, and arrived at an apartment door that had been propped open with a large cardboard box. Eric pushed open the door and kicked the box so it went flying across the room. This apartment, like Audrey's, was mostly empty, but unlike Audrey's place, it was impressively large. It was an open living room dining room with an attached kitchen that was only separated by an island. But there were no chairs, no rugs, no couch, no tables, not even a TV. The only items I could see from where I stood at the door were a stack of dishes in the sink, a mattress in one corner, and a computer monitor sitting at the foot of this mattress with its keyboard resting atop the bed. Eric walked to the mattress, flopped down, and immediately began typing away at the keyboard. As I watched Eric engrossed in his typing, I heard a cat meow. I turned to see a tiny white kitten enter the room from an open bedroom door. It was a puffball, 9 inches long, and it made another cute noise as it walked directly toward me. As the kitten got close, I leaned down to touch it, but Eric yelled, "Stay away from that cat!" I jumped back and screamed, "Because of the cocaine?" "What?" Eric asked, still looking at his computer monitor, typing away. "The cat has ringworm, dude. Benny is getting it some medicine, but don't touch it, or you'll get ringworm." I tried to heed this warning, but the cat was curious. It walked directly toward me, and I was forced to back in a circle around the empty room to avoid it. Eventually, I made my way to Eric's mattress. At this, Eric finally looked up from his computer and yelled, "Get the fuck away from here," directed at the cat, and the cat scurried off and disappeared into the room from which it had come. "What's up?" I asked. "Nothing," said Eric, still focused on his computer. I looked on the floor beside Eric's mattress and now noticed a row of Red Sox hats neatly placed in a line. Next to this was 5 pairs of Nike Air Force Ones. As I stood there surveying this, I thought back on the pink girl and her stolen sneaker inserts. "I guess Adam, Ohio finally scared you away, huh?" I said, remembering Eric and my last day together. "Fuck Adam, Ohio," said Eric. "You think I give a shit about that loser? I'm just staying here with Benny. He's got a balcony." Eric pointed to his right, and there was, indeed, a sliding glass door leading to a small triangular balcony. I watched Eric as he focused on his computer. Before Facebook, MySpace, or Friendster, there was an earlier social network completely devoted to the alternative scene. Eric was on this website messaging with someone. After a long silence, I asked, "What are you doing?" "Dude," said Eric, "it is so easy to hook up with girls online. It's ridiculous." He typed for a little longer and then asked, "Wait, did you fuck Audrey the other night after start? You looked like you were doing all right." Yeah, no," I said. "We hooked up, but we didn't have sex." I watched Eric type for another moment, and then I said, "There's actually something I want to ask you, or tell you, I don't know." Eric didn't look up. "So, I didn't have sex with Audrey, and actually, I've never had sex with anyone, ever, in my life. Not even one time." I stood there, curious how Eric would react to this. He didn't say anything at first, and when he finally did, he never turned away from his computer. He just quietly muttered, "You've had sex before." I swear I haven't. I never told you this before, but I am a virgin." Eric stopped typing for a moment. He looked up and asked, "You're really a virgin, for real?" I nodded. "That's fucking crazy, dude. How?" "I don't know, man. I think I'm asexual." Eric gently shook his head, turned back to his computer, and said, "That's crazy, dude." "That's not even the crazy part," I said. "So, after that night with Audrey, she told some people about it, about me being a virgin. Like, when Audrey and I were in bed together, I wouldn't even let her touch my penis." "Like a psycho," Eric cut in. "And I'm telling you, Eric, since that day, women have been trying to sleep with me. I'm not saying every woman, I don't know how many people Audrey told, but they're There have been 2 girls in the last 2 months who took me home and were literally like, I'm going to take your virginity. And when I said no, they went crazy. What are you talking about? Eric asked. They're like trying to rip my underwear off, and they're yelling at me. Everyone says men are pushy when it comes to sex, but women are also pushy, like crazy fucking pushy. Eric started laughing. I don't know if anyone even knows this because no man ever says no to a woman, but I'm telling you, the women get angry. Eric was now laughing so hard he was bent over. He looked up at me and asked, Are you mad about it? No, I said, shrugging. I don't mind, but I'm not going to have sex with them just because they're yelling at me. Why not, dude? Because I'm asexual, probably. I stepped away from Eric's mattress and started pacing around the apartment. I was sweating. I spoke as I walked. That night with Audrey was really crazy, because Dee Dee ended up coming over to Audrey's apartment as well. She came over with Anderson, and it was really fucking up my mind because Yo, Eric cut in. Dee Dee and Audrey? Those girls are already 2 of the most confused human beings that have maybe ever lived. So I'm sure you were fucking their minds up more than they were fucking up yours. Eric started laughing again. I mean, I think they're great people, I said. I'm not trying to say anything bad about them. I love them, said Eric, putting his hand on his chest. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that one time I was walking up Calumet Street with Dee Dee, and she saw a dead mouse and she started crying. There was a dead mouse in the gutter, and she basically collapsed on the ground right in front of me and started weeping. Okay, I said hesitantly. I don't know what that has to do with anything. Suddenly, Eric jumped to his feet while still atop the mattress. He pointed at me and said, Let's do this haircut. Moments later, I was following Eric across the apartment. He brought me to the bedroom where I'd last seen the cat. I looked inside and suddenly realized why the apartment was empty. Everything seemed to be crammed into this one room. Chairs were overflowing with dirty laundry. Posters were poorly tacked to the walls. Beer cans rested everywhere, each one a makeshift ashtray. Eric stepped over a pile of trash. He made his way to one wall and lifted a wooden chair out of the rubble. He shook the chair as he lifted it, causing an ashtray to fall off the seat and spill everywhere. The entire time Eric was retrieving the chair, he spoke to the kitten who was nestled in the corner on a filthy couch. You stay right there, you stay right there, you stay right there, Eric repeated. As Eric exited with the chair, he looked at me and nodded over his shoulder. Benny's room, he said as way of explanation. Eric placed the chair in the middle of the living room. He walked into the bathroom and grabbed a dirty towel off the ground. We got hair clippers here, so I can give you a proper cut this time, he said, digging through a drawer. I sat in the chair and Eric draped the dirty towel over my shoulders. He placed the clippers on the ground and started trimming my hair with just a pair of scissors and a comb. This is the other thing about these girls, I said, staring forward, keeping my head still. Every one of them, including Audrey, at one point, they start calling me gay. Because you're making them insecure, said Eric. Yeah, I know, I said. But it's funny because they always use words like they're trying to be helpful to me or something. But the actual way they say it, like their tone, it's just like, you're gay. Like the same way the jocks say it. Yeah, said Eric. They're trying to shame you because they are insecure. No, I know, I totally get that. But what's funny is these girls don't understand that rednecks in my hometown have been calling me gay since I was 16 for having a mohawk or whatever. Like, I don't care. This is not going to make me... But before I could finish my thought, I was interrupted by something pulling on the bottom of my pants. My eyes darted down, and I found the cute little kitten on its hind legs, busy scratching away at my jeans. Eric's scissors nearly took my ear off as I jumped onto the seat of the chair. "Get the fuck out of here!" yelled Eric, but the cat walked straight toward him. Soon Eric was running circles around the empty living room with the kitten following just behind. Eric did a few spins, charged left then right, and eventually stumbled upon the cardboard box he had kicked when we first entered the apartment. He dropped to his knees and used the box to block the kitten. Eventually, he ushered the cat back to the bedroom, using the box as a guide. After my haircut, I climbed in the shower. Of course, there was no shower curtain. As I rinsed my body, I watched water spill on the bathroom floor. I would continue living like this for a while, both loosely homeless and loosely celibate, two unconventional choices that I had made in my life. Over the next year, there were a few more women who made it their mission to take my virginity, but I held strong. That is, until one girl finally pinned me down. Literally. But that's a story for another time. I climbed out of the shower and found Eric sitting atop his mattress watching a movie on his computer. I picked up the wooden chair and put it beside his bed. I guess Eric had cleaned up my fallen hair while I was in the bathroom. As we watched the movie in silence, I got a glimpse at what Eric had been doing for the last 2 months. He calmly sat on his bed, more serene than I had ever seen him, hibernating to survive the winter. In the final minutes of the film, I suddenly became aware of something in my peripheral vision. I turned to find the kitten approaching. I guess Eric had opened the bedroom door while I was in the shower. "Hey," I said, hitting Eric's shoulder. Eric immediately began shouting, but like last time, the kitten seemed unconcerned. As the cat got closer, I raised my legs, still sitting on the chair, and Eric stood up on his mattress. "Not on the bed," Eric yelled, but the kitten didn't care. This tiny puffball used all 8 inches of its body to leap from the floor onto Eric's sheets. Eric dashed off. For safety, he darted behind the kitchen island, but unfortunately, this island wasn't completely freestanding. One side wrapped around and connected to the wall. Of course, the kitten followed, and soon there was nothing Eric could do but leap onto the counter. He stood there, 3 feet in the air, slightly hunched over, so his head didn't hit the ceiling. The kitten let off a tiny meow. "What do we do?" I asked. "I don't know," said Eric. "Do you need to feed it or something?" Eric looked around and said, "I think there's an open can of cat food in the refrigerator." Now, Eric was technically in the kitchen, but his mattress rested just at the foot of the island, and from where I hovered on my chair, I was actually closer to the refrigerator than he was. In a single motion, I sprinted to the refrigerator and opened its door. I peered inside, and, maybe unsurprisingly, there was absolutely nothing in there. I glanced down, saw the kitten approaching, and moments later, found myself hunched over, standing next to Eric on top of the island. "It was empty," I yelled. Eric punched the ceiling. I looked down at the kitten. It was running in circles below us on the tile floor. I looked over at Eric, frightened in his sweatshirt and basketball shorts. I looked at myself, my pants still covered in my own hair. This day was not dissimilar to many we had had in the past. Like usual, we were two friends killing time in an apartment that neither of us lived in. We were two people looking out for each other, trying to help one another scrape by. But, most importantly, we were two grown men trapped on top of a kitchen counter, trying to escape a defenseless little kitten. So begins Season 4 of Listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. If you liked what you heard, please tell a friend about the show. This is maybe the most helpful thing you can do for me. Word of mouth is really the best system small artists have to reach a bigger audience. I seriously appreciate the help. I did get ringworm once from a cat. It was a few years earlier than this story. It was also from a kitten. I got it in San Francisco when I was 19. And then I had to travel 3.5 days on a bus from the Bay Area back to my parents' house in Vermont with ringworm. I was all itchy. And then by the time I saw a doctor, I had spread it all around my parents' house. So now me and my whole family had to use the medicated cream to get rid of it. Anyway, I'm now ringworm free since 2000, so I got that going for me. I've got another 5 episodes coming this season, coming in the next few weeks. And they're all on the long side. They're all over an hour. And I'm asking you listeners, if you like what you're hearing, to Venmo me $5. $5 for the season, $1 per episode. That's over 6 hours of entertainment. Most people don't send anything, unless I know them. My friends send me some money. But most of you listening right now won't send anything, which is sad. If you listen to every episode up through this one, all of the seasons, and you've never sent any money, you have to send something now. That's the rule. My Venmo is at Fletcher C. Johnson, and my PayPal is fletchercjohnson@gmail.com. If you can't afford $5, send $4 or $3. Anything helps. But if you support the podcast with $20 or more, this season, I've got a really great book for you. I will send you a little book that I wrote. I will mail it to you. For $20 or more, you will get your hands on this beautifully funny book. And I want to say thank you to anyone who has supported my podcast in the past. Oh, and I've got a big thank you to Zach Gajewski, editor extraordinaire, who helped edit the written story that I read in this episode. He edited a few of my stories this year. On a final note, I'll say, now that the monoculture has taken over the United States, I think little 20-year-old assholes have no choice but to do the exact opposite of what Scandalous and I did. You got to bring back the elitism. No one is allowed to sell out. You only like people who throw it all away for integrity. You gotta gatekeep it up. Piss off your friends. Be cool about it. Have fun. I'm too old to give a shit. But if I was young again, you know I'd still be a little asshole. Next week, I'm coming at you with a collection of stories about bicycles. Everyone is about bicycles, but somehow they all end up being love stories. So next week, bicycles and love. You've been listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. I'm Fletcher C. Johnson. Thanks for listening.